Several months ago, I did a virtual demo for the Rocky Mountain Smiths. With COVID, we aren't doing any in-person live demos, so we're doing pre-recorded Zoom demos. For that demo, I made this claw hammer. It isn't quite finished, so today I am going to complete the claw hammer, get it all done, hardened, tempered, hopefully get a handle on it, and then I'm going to kind of re-edit that original video so you get to see from beginning to end forging the claw hammer with all of the steps in there. I'll just try to edit out the stuff that was specifically for the Rocky Mountain Smiths group. So sit back and enjoy the first part of the demo from a few months ago, and then we'll pick it back up from here before we get to the end. Now, since this is a virtual demo and Mike isn't coming to the demo and bringing coffee and donuts, I hope everybody was able to provide their own coffee and donuts. I'm sure this is not as good as what Mike buys, but it'll just have to do. Nah, that's pretty bad. Anyways, what do you say we get started? Now, what I thought I would do for today's demo is make a claw hammer. And to make the claw hammer, I'm starting with a piece of 4140 that is 1 inch by 1 3/4. I just picked this because I happen to have a piece this size, and it is 3.5 inches long. I've taken the time to pre-drill 2 5/16 holes that are spaced at the center line here, and they're 3/4 inch center to center. This is something Francis Whitaker used to advocate, and it makes it a lot easier to get your hole exactly where you want it. It's a lot easier to get it straight. It creates a path of least resistance, so it's faster and easier to punch. And I'm just going to go ahead and punch this by hand. Frequently I would go to the power hammer and do it, but it's not that hard if you pre-drill holes to just use a slot punch by hand at the anvil. And I have a slot punch that will go to about the center point of each of these holes, and that way all I'm dealing with is that web in the middle. I also have a little bit of punch lube from Quick and Dirty Tool Works that I can use to help keep the punch from getting stuck, but I won't need that until we get most of the way through. Once you start to establish a hole, it goes a lot smoother. 4140 can be tough stuff, so get it hot again. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and work some from the back now. With the opposite side. I guess it's a top and a bottom, not a back and a front. My punch, by the way, is made from S7, so it puts up with the heat pretty well, and I don't mind quenching it in water as long as it's not glowing. I've never had one crack because of that, so knock on wood, I should be able to get away with that. It's a little crooked, so I'm trying to push the hole over some. In the end, it probably doesn't matter that much. I think I'm going to put a little punch lube on here before that dries all the way through. It's just kind of a waxy stuff. It's about out. I think the slug is probably sheared out, it's just stuck in there, so I just need to drive it all the way through. Lots of punch lube on that. I like these hot mill gloves. I can feel the heat, but I'm not being burned. So there's our hole all the way through. It's a little bit off center, but we'll be able to deal with that. And the gloves, now that I've mentioned that, these are the Carolina hot mill gloves that Amy at Pay Tool sells. With our eye punched, I'm going to go to half face blows at the near edge of the anvil. That's with the hammer half on, half off the anvil. And I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch here and start offsetting that. I'm going to do that both for the face of the hammer and for the claw of the hammer. It doesn't really matter which is which. The eye is centered, so this should be balanced. But one side's going to have to be drawn out long and skinny. One side I'm going to let upset a little bit this way so that the face is hopefully a little bit larger than this 1 inch dimension. Don't have a perfectly fitting pair of tongs for this, unfortunately, but this pair will at least keep them from flying out and flying across the shop. I'll leave that one to turn into the face probably. And that gives me a square section I can hold much better. I think I got that off a little bit. I would have liked to have been a little closer in here, but I might be able to grind that or just not worry about it. Well, that gets some of the heavier work done anyways. Next I'm going to try and square up the face of this a little bit to get it all back in line. You can see it's kind of off at an angle there. And try and push the claw back up a little bit. Things are a little offset. First I need to get a drift in here so I can work on these other elements. That should straighten that out a little bit. And start cleaning up that eye again. A lot of back and forth. There will be more drifting of the eye later, but that's not a bad place to leave it for the time being. Need to work some more on the claw, and I need to refine the face. I think I'll do the face first. Now, that face is not perfectly square, so that's the first thing I want to take care of. Kind of going for a tapered octagonal striking face here. So now for the fun part, let's split this to make the claws. And when you do, and a claw hammer works better if the claws are beveled on the inside so you can better grab the nail head. And it just so happens that doing this with a hot cut will naturally leave a bevel, so that is the easiest and most efficient way to do this. It's at least starting to look like a claw hammer. I want to see if it's twisted, which I think it is. Didn't behave very well under the treadle hammer. Yeah, it's got a definite twist, so I need to put that in the vise. looks a lot better. What's the face look like? Yeah, it's a little off, but I think I'll grind it to get it just right. There's going to be a lot of grinding on this, I'm afraid. And with that in mind, I'm going to bury this in a bucket of vermiculite. And I'm going to let it stay there overnight. It's the next morning. I've been doing some grinding on the hammerhead. I started off with a 60 grit belt and got the profile pretty much where I wanted it. Using the drift, I can check to see if it's square and in line with the handle, and that kind of gives me an idea what it's going to hang on the handle like. Then I went to a 220 grit belt, cleaned it up on that, but it's not quite what I would like. The claw is a little bit wonky here. It's a little off there. It's going to need some cleanup inside the claw, and the head is a little smaller than I would like, and perhaps a little off center. So I'm going to put it back in the forge. I'm going to clean this up some. I'm going to straighten this up. And this is often the way these things go, that I forge them out. I think they're pretty close. I grind them and I see the flaws and I see the irregularities. So I go back to the forge, then I let them cool again, go back to the grinder. And if I made hammers like this all the time, I probably wouldn't have to do that. I'd know better what I was looking for right off the forge the first time. So we're going to put this back in the forge. I think I'm going to upset the head end a little bit to try and make that a little bit bigger, get a bigger striking surface on that. We're going to straighten the claw and hopefully get it all in shape and ready to harden and temper. One final drifting from the top. I think I'm in much better shape now than I was. And we'll go ahead and heat it and anneal it one more time. Well, that should catch us up to where we are now. The next thing I need to do is clean up the inside of the claw. The chisel cut leaves us a little bit ragged, and it's going to be a whole lot easier to use it to pull nails if we clean that up. You could probably get a real fine file in there, maybe do a little of this with a hacksaw because it's even thinner than a file. But I think I'm going to go ahead and enjoy the luxury of having a die grinder with a little cutoff disc on it, which is also a great opportunity to remind you that Black Bear Forge is now being sponsored by Combat Abrasives. They have a wide variety of belts in various sizes, various grits for all of your metalworking needs. There's a link to their website down in the video description, along with a coupon code BLACKBEAR10 that should get you a discount on your next order. I'm going to start with a fresh 60 grit belt. And I'm running this on this homemade grinder that runs a little bit slower than a lot of other grinders, and that allows me a little bit more control, plus keeps the workpiece a little bit cooler while I'm working. One reason I like this grinder is because it has more versatility to it. I have a lot of different wheel sizes for this, more than I do for my other grinders. See if that fits in there. That's much better. Now we're going to go to a 120 grit belt and clean off the scratch marks from that. I don't feel like I really need to polish the whole thing up. You certainly could if you've got a belt grinder that's relatively fast and simple. I just wanted to make sure everything was straight and even and just looked good, but I don't mind the forged finish on the hammerhead. And that's down to a 220 grit finish, and that's where we're going to go ahead and harden it and temper it. Now, we have looked at lots of different hardening and tempering processes in the past. I frequently go ahead and do it in the forge just to show you that it can be done in the forge. But personally, I prefer to do it in the electronic heat treat oven. So today that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go warm up the Paragon heat treat oven, and we're going to harden and temper it in there. If you have an oven like this available, it's absolutely the best way to get accurate, repeatable results. If you don't, go ahead and use the forge. That's always an option. And I'll set the program for that oven up for a 20-minute soak at 1200 degrees just to get a good even heat. Bring it up slowly then to 1570, which should be the proper critical temperature for this steel. And then we're going to quench it in oil. Remember to preheat your oil, especially during the winter, because it's awfully cold. The oil is going to be really thick, and it does not harden evenly if the oil is thick and kind of goopy. You want warm, thin oil so it circulates freely around the piece while you harden. Into the toaster oven for a nice even temper. Now somebody is going to ask what oil I use for tempering. It's just something I ordered from a local petroleum supplier. Said I needed some quenching oil. They found whatever product it is they carry. They ordered a bucket in for me, and I have no idea what the brand name is. Anything sold as quenching oil should be just fine. A lot of people use canola oil or olive oil. I don't use those in the shop because we have bears and raccoons and skunks and chipmunks and mice and things like that around here. And I really don't want to invite them in the shop because they think that smells like food. Anyways, that will sit in the little toaster oven to temper now for an hour. By the time that's done, it'll be a little bit late in the day and it's going to be getting cold up here in the shop. So I will be back tomorrow to pick that up, but you'll see it right here in just a few seconds. I'm just going to take this back to the 220 grit belt on the belt sander and clean up the face. I think the rest of it I would like to leave darker. Well, it's starting to snow lightly outside, getting kind of cold, so I think we're going to finish this project in the basement. Got the hammerhead, and I've got a handle from House Handles. This is an octagonal handle, which I think will be really a nice, unique looking handle on this hammerhead. Something a little out of the ordinary anyways. And this is just a stock handle. I'm lucky enough that it looks like it's going to fit almost perfectly. Yeah, that starts to go on there. There'll be a little bit of trimming, but not a whole lot. Oh, by the way, the hammerhead ends up weighing 1 pound, 1.5 ounces. 16-ounce hammers are really pretty common, so that's right in that size range. Now remember, when you see the hammer handle, driving the handle in this way and letting the inertia from the head pull that head up onto the handle is the best way to go. Double check it and make sure it's going on straight. Wow, I think this one's going to go on really fast and easy. I got real lucky. There's a little bit of a gap here, so I'm going to use a wedge that's a little bit large. Probably be better to start with a little bit better to start with a wider hammer handle front to back. But since this is one I'm going to keep and use myself, I'm going to be okay with it if it's just a little bit funky. Plus, I don't have another alternative right now, and I don't think I could buy one. This eye is probably a little bit big for standard hammer handles, so a custom-made handle might be in order, especially if you're sending it out to a customer. I want to check my saw kerf in here to make sure it's almost all the way to the bottom of the hammer eye. So I'm going to put a little bit of a mark on there. Then I can get the hammer handle back out. And I can tell here, I don't know if you can see that or not, but that'll need to be cut a little bit further. Plus I'm going to trim this up where it's been peeling some wood off so I can drive it up just a little bit tighter. For that, I'm just going to use a little utility knife. And while I don't do many knives these days, this is a good practical knife, and I think maybe sometime in the not too distant future we'll look at making a similar knife to this. Be a good project. I'm going to go to the bandsaw and extend that cut before I remove that pencil mark. By the way, if you hear an odd noise, kind of a rhythmic clacking sound, Janet's upstairs working with the spinning wheel, so that's what you're listening to there. Now for the wedge, because that handle is just a little bit short front to back, I want to make sure I've got a wedge that will fill that, and this wedge that came with the handle's too small. But luckily, as I do handles for axes and adzes and hammers, whatever else I'm making in the shop, I usually cut a whole bunch of extra wedges at one time, so I should have something laying around that's going to fit. So I will probably do a little bit of other trimming on this before I'm all done with it. And I'll take that to the bandsaw, cut that down. When you're looking at the thickness of a wedge, you need to think about what it takes to fill the saw kerf, push the handle over tight on both sides, and then make sure you're really compressing that handle wood so it's good and tight. This is a bit of overkill. I'm going to trim it down, probably down into here. And I just do this on a woodworking bandsaw. You could probably do it with hand tools. You can probably do it all with a knife if you wanted to. I mean, this isn't that hard to trim. In fact, I will fine tune it with a knife before I'm all done. And a little coarse sandpaper doesn't hurt. Sure that fits. It doesn't quite. That's where I use the knife to fine tune it. I want this to be a drive-in fit. So that starts to go in pretty well. I think that's about where we're going to leave that. And I do put a little wood glue on the wood wedge. Get that started first. So then I clean up any glue squeeze out, and I'll let that dry. We trimmed that off and did a little sanding on it now that the wood glue's pretty much dry. I'll seat the wedge. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the handle just to protect it. make it look a little bit prettier. This is a Watco Danish oil. You can use linseed oil or tung oil, whatever you got. Well, that is a perfectly functional hammer, and it swings very nicely. Comfortable grip with this handle. I really kind of like octagon handles. They don't slip around in your hand at all, but they aren't angular enough that I feel like they're going to cause a blister. Anyways, that's all I've got for today's video. If you're interested in more of what Rocky Mountain Smiths has been doing for the virtual Zoom demos during the COVID pandemic, check out the Rocky Mountain Smiths YouTube channel. Those will slowly start showing up on that channel so that eventually they'll all be on there. Right now, the current month's video is only shown live on Zoom and only for paid members. So if you want to see those, you need to join Rocky Mountain Smiths. But that also comes with the newsletter and access to the lending library, so it's a pretty good deal one way or the other. I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.